In this video, we are going to talk about 6 practical shooting tips based around composition, car photography, and Instagram. We're going to go out and shoot some POV so I can show you guys practically how I shoot out in the field, but as well I'm going to show you some photos that I've done for brands and clients that have been posted to Instagram. And lastly, we're going to talk about some things that I would suggest avoiding when you're taking your car photos and intending to post them to a social platform like Instagram. Now, the objective of good composition is to use all the elements at your disposal to draw the viewer's eye and attention to your subject. In this case, we're using cars. So we're gonna talk about framing, lighting, and even some editing techniques that will help you accomplish a well-composed photo. Let's go. So I'm gonna put the GoPro on, we're gonna shoot some POV with my full frame camera and a 35mm because it's a super popular focal length. And I'm gonna show you guys how I use the rule of thirds to line up my car to best frame it inside of an Instagram post. The rule of thirds is gonna help you a ton because it just kind of gives you those guidelines vertically and horizontally, and to keep your camera level so you don't have to crop it too much in post. Settings wise, we're shooting 2.2 aperture. Our ISO is at 100, and we're gonna shoot vertical mode here, and I'm gonna make sure to expose to make sure I have all my highlights in the frame there. As you can see here, I'm gonna line the car up. I'm gonna try and put the wheels on the bottom third of the camera, and then on the top of the frame, I'm gonna put whatever we have kind of behind it. So I'm just gonna snap the photo here. And I'll do a quick edit on it so you guys can see what it actually looks like. Hopefully you guys can see in the frame how I'm setting that up. And I'm gonna give just a little bit of space on either side there. I'm gonna do a secondary example using my phone because you can actually see the line of thirds there. And so I'm gonna actually line up the sky and the clouds on that top right third. And I'm gonna place the car on the bottom third, and notice that there's still space at the bottom. You don't always have to perfectly center frame it. With cars, I find that center framing leaves too much space on the bottom. So you actually wanna put the car more close to that bottom third line. It looks like there's people out on the lake. Now that you know how to frame your car in the image and utilize the rule of thirds to your advantage, let's talk about adding depth to your photo. So to get some professional tips on this topic, I went and hung out with my absolute favorite photographer here in Canada and asked him some composition tips and how he adds that depth in his photos. They were doing a shoot for GMC, so I thought this was a great opportunity for me to tag along and glean a little bit of wisdom off these guys that I could share with you. So when you're looking at composition, what are you trying to get?
So leading lines are great, obviously. I look for balance a lot. So if I'm like putting something in one end of the frame to balance it out with another, it's more pleasing to the eye. Like let's say if you've got something on one third, to have something kind of balancing it on the other third is always great, or like a transition between two things, or just anything that leads the eye. Like I think if you can make it easier for the viewer to look at an image and you know, it stands out right away where you're supposed to look, so you lead their eyes really, that's what you want. So I'm gonna balance here on the 1/3 line, and then the other third line is like the horizon, so that makes it really pleasing. They stand out because they're bright, and this is bright, so your eye immediately knows, okay, you come here, you go there.
So after chatting with Victor, he is an expert at utilizing balance, harmony, leading lines, and of course those rule of thirds to draw our eyes to the things that he wants to see in the photo. As you can see, his photography is incredible, so go give him a follow. This Taycan photo here is one of my absolute favorite photos in that the Taycan is centered, and in the background we have beautiful mountains that are framed well. And then I used a bit of an editing technique here because I don't have any foreground elements. I'm using a linear gradient in Lightroom, dragging it from the bottom of the image up towards my car and darkening that part of the image in order to take away light so that your eyes are drawn to the brighter part of the image, which is the car. This is a great editing technique no matter what niche of photography you are shooting, as our eyes are drawn to light, so you want to take away and remove light from areas that you don't want your eye to be drawn to. The third tip is experiment with your angles. I often find myself actually getting stuck shooting these same angles, and that gets quite boring. I tend to use a 35 mil, but take your time with the car. As you can see in this video up here, when I was shooting this Audi S5 for a local car dealership, I was really intentional to take my time and walk around the car. It's always good, I find, when I'm shooting a new vehicle to actually do a walk around, and you can start to find lines really quick. Like obviously you can see kind of the way that the curves land on the car, how the light reflects off each car differently. Another way to get some really unique and experimental angles is with a drone. They're more cost effective than ever. I'm currently using the DJI Mini 3 Pro, which I'll link down in the description below. But you can see here, you can get some pretty cool photos, which leads me into my fourth point, which is using negative space or even attempting minimalism in your car photography. What this is doing is clearly just drawing our eye to the one subject in our frame, giving us a minimalistic look. This isn't obviously an overcomplicated tip, but this will look really nice in your Instagram feeds as it adds a little bit of zhuzh, a little bit of to your Instagram when people look and they see that you have a bit more of a diverse portfolio. I don't know why I used zhuzh or this is weird, but hopefully you know what I mean. If you guys are finding these tips helpful, make sure to hit that like button for me. And if you're enjoying how these are edited, a lot of these photos are edited with my car photography presets. I've got my Lightroom toolkit where you can stack different presets on top of each other to create an image that actually works well for your car photography. It is not a copy and paste kind of preset, and often we are left disappointed with those types of presets with car photography. So these are built specifically for you. Check them out in the link in the description below. The fifth tip that I have for you guys when you're composing your photos is look for interesting walls or textures or things that you can shoot around. I'm always looking for interesting walls, interesting textures, maybe even art that I can park a car in front of, as it adds visual interest and depth. But something that I would suggest avoiding is anything that is too overcomplicated or is actually going to distract the viewer from the subject or the car. In professional car photography, they actually give you guidebooks and PDFs saying do not film in front of graffiti walls or things with distracting images, because the objective of this is to draw your eye to the car. So if you're ever shooting for big brands, keep that in mind. This photo here is one of my favorite places to shoot, as we have controlled lighting for the most part and a really cool textured wall. But this wall actually leads me into my sixth point, which is pay attention to the lighting. Lighting is one of the most important aspects of photography, no matter what niche you're in. And in regards to composition specifically, our eyes again are drawn to light. So you can use light or a lack of light to draw your eyes to a subject. Picking the best time of day like sunrise or sunset, this gives you that kind of beauty lighting look. Now if you're shooting in a situation like this where it's quite shadowy, we can actually start using some editing techniques to draw our eyes to the car. So again, you can bring that linear gradient from the bottom of your image to subtract light. You can add a really cool lighting effects using the linear gradient tool here to fake sunlight if you want. And then of course, make sure that your subject is the brightest part of the image. It doesn't have to be crazy blown out, but just very subtly. That's why there's this thing called vignetting, which I don't really tend to use the vignette tool, but the purpose of that is to bring your eyes towards the middle of the frame. Now, before I get into the tips of what maybe not to do, just remember that composition is a personal thing. You guys can absolutely frame your photo however you want. It's your creative eye, it's your art. With that said, here are a couple things that I would suggest avoiding when it comes to your car photography and posting to social platforms like Instagram or Vero or wherever you decide to post this. The first thing that I've seen a few photographers do is they actually fill the entire image with their car. Now this would probably look good if you're trying to put that car up on a picture on your wall, in your garage somewhere, in your office. It probably will look really great in a frame. But when it comes to Instagram, when you post that photo and it lands on your grid, people come to your portfolio, oftentimes your car is now out of frame or it's not fully in that square box. I see a lot of this on Instagram, which is totally fine, but that's just my recommendation. If you're trying to build a nice portfolio on Instagram, make sure that the car is framed nicely in that square box. Which leads me to the second thing that I would avoid is putting your car too far to the left, the right, or the bottom of the frame. Of course, this is a really cool creative decision if you have the car at the very bottom of the frame and something really cool above it. But to me, this probably isn't gonna land well on Instagram. And then you have to think about, is the focus really the automobile at this point? So again, it totally depends where you're posting, who you're shooting for, whether it's just a personal project for a brand or a car company. But I'm just recommending that whatever you're shooting, the car, the subject, the object, that you're intentional to keep that framed in the center when it comes to Instagram and posting to social. You might want to check out this playlist here as it goes through a whole bunch of editing tutorials, but otherwise I appreciate your guys' time so much. Consider subscribing if you want more content like this, but otherwise I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.